abbiamo ora in linea via Teams questa volta, non Zoom, la senatrice Kerrynne Liddle, che è anche ministro ombra per gli australiani indigeni. So Senator Kerrynne Liddle, Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians. Thank you very much for coming to Radio Italia 1 Adelaide.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you and your listeners.
Yes, so the catalyst for this conversation was NAIDOC week. That was last week. And so maybe I can let's start by asking you to reflect on how you interpret the theme for NAIDOC week, which is focusing on the next generation of Indigenous Australians.
Well, NAIDOC is a celebration of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in this country, and it's an event for everyone. It is an annual event, and every year there is a different theme, and every year people join in a range of activities across the country to participate in a celebration of shared understanding and shared commitment, not just in recognising the past, but in also recognising the future.
Yes, and so this, you talked about Indigenous Australians. How is it relevant to what you, as Shadow Minister, are taking forward in the Shadow Cabinet, or Shadow Ministry of the Liberal National Coalition?
Well, I've just taken up the role of Shadow Minister for Indigenous Australians, and as an Aboriginal person from Central Australia, both my parents are Aboriginal people. They are Aboriginal people by identity. We grew up on country, and we're very lucky, I guess, to have not just grown up with a very strong identity, but also being a family and being a community that's also celebrated that identity. And that's particularly important to me, and that's particularly important as it is to all communities that have language, culture, and a sense of community and belonging.
Yes, and now I'm not sure what they mean by next generation. What is the definition? Maybe you are part of this next generation, or maybe it might be the next generation again. So how do you interpret, what's your contribution to opening up and helping the understanding of, and maybe integration, I'm not sure that's the correct term to use, of Indigenous Australians with the broader community?
Well, I guess belonging is a really important concept for any human being, and I guess it's the essence of communities, of individuals, and that is who they are, what they represent, how they see the world, and their sense of not just belonging as individuals within a community, but also being able to be part of the broader community. And that's really important for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, as it is for all peoples in Australia and anywhere in the world, I guess.
Yes, and part of what the NAIDOC, at least the website, was talking about is self-determination. I'm not sure what we mean by self-determination. We've just had a referendum on a voice to Parliament that was rejected. Not that was a question of self-determination, but it was possibly a contribution to the outcome. Where do you see this idea of self-determination fitting in what we've just discussed?
Self-determination for me is about people being able to contribute and have a say in a way forward for them. That self-determination is not something that belongs solely to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. It belongs to all peoples, and that's what's important about the concept of self-determination. People have the ability to participate in decisions that impact them. And we see that in a range of different ways. We see that people can contribute in politics, they can contribute in the workplace, they can contribute in public forums. There are a whole range of ways that people can actually contribute. And I guess some people call that self-determination.
Yes, and I guess it might be also interpreted as being involved in the decision-making process. And I've heard of several examples where the communities getting involved, Indigenous communities, and running activities seems to get better results than when it's sort of decided by someone in Canberra or in another capital city. Do you see that as being part of the improved situation of Indigenous Australians?
Well, I think what's really important is that any money that comes from the taxpayer is applied in the way that it's intended. And certainly in my time in politics, as it has been in my time in business and in working in many of those organisations themselves, it is really important that a focus is on the delivery of outcomes. And regardless of what provider you actually are, whether you're an Aboriginal community control provider or you're a provider of services to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community, I have a very strong view about accountability of taxpayers' money. And regardless of how and who makes those decisions about how that funding is applied, there must be outcomes and there must be accountability. And ultimately, when the money is coming from the taxpayer, that's where the accountability sits.
Yes, it's important considerations. As I recall, when we've had this our previous conversation, at least your family comes from the Alice Springs area, if I remember correctly, and now you're a senator for South Australia. And I've met another person also from Alice Springs that is in South Australia, Jenny Caruso, Auntie Jenny Caruso, who has an Italian surname because she's married into an Italian family. You also mentioned that, and it's the clock going on in the background here. How do you see the melding of cultures and the coexistence of cultures in your family background, if that's something you want to talk about?
It's the Italian Aboriginal history in this country is little known, but it's also different depending on where you lived. And certainly, I remember being told stories, and I've seen it over the years where there are marriages between Aboriginal people and Italian people. And some of that goes back, not all of it, some of it goes back to the war years where in this country, as people were sent away for war, Italian people were already in this country. People who had come to this country were put on pastoral properties during that time to work. I guess the government of the day to keep an eye on them as well because they were in quite isolated areas. And there were also Aboriginal people living in those areas. So there was some love too that came out of that terrible period of our history globally. So there is that history in families as well. In my family, I actually married to an Italian bloke for about 30 years here in South Australia. His family came from a little village outside of Naples, and his family, some of them moved over here, some of them stayed in Italy. So I've also been exposed to the beautiful stuff that is Italian culture, the family, some of the language, some of the getting together with food, celebrating those things. And I have to say that the importance of community, the importance of language, the importance of food and gathering is really global language that also applies to Aboriginal people.
Yes, indeed. Well, you just reminded me, once when I was teaching in China, I was told we in China place a lot of value on food and on family. I said, well, I've got an Italian name. We place a lot of value on food and family. And food is one way for allowing family and community to exist. And what you've just described about the Indigenous community. And I think that the name of the town, the village we mentioned before going on into this recording is Marigliano, near Naples.
You are right.
Town. Yes,
and you've got the perfect pronunciation.
Yes, so actually I've had a bit of a look at the census. You might know that in the census people have the option of indicating whether they're of Indigenous background or not. There's also a question around cultural identity, and so I've combined the two to see who claims being Indigenous and who has Italian backgrounds. And in South Australia, there's about close to 700 people who ticked both those those boxes, maybe 9 or 10,000 Australia-wide, which is larger than I was expecting. I would have imagined a big number for, say, Irish and Indigenous. And looking at the stats, on average, the Italian Indigenous are younger than Indigenous. We know Indigenous are younger than the general population because life expectancy, lifespan is shorter. But general, some of the outcomes are better, quote unquote, than you get for the average of Indigenous Australians, which is, I guess, it's encouraging. It suggests that there's more upward mobility, social mobility, and economic mobility. How do we see that going forward? What does a coalition, or you specifically, think we can work more and better on bridging the gap, for example, or the gaps? You have mentioned the importance of accountability, of how resources are allocated. That's very important. Are there things that you think we're not doing correctly, could be done better? But there must be, obviously.
Yeah. Look, I think, and I did a little bit of research myself and found out that of Italian people in Australia in the last census, 1% of Italian people also identified as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people. So I was surprised by that number as well. But that's very interesting. Look, we've got over 3% of people in Australia identify as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. At the last census, it was identified that there were 25% more people that identified than the previous census, and that could not be explained by birth rate alone. So we've got people who are identifying as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, which, as a person who is a legislator and a person who is in Parliament, that understanding that more is really important to me, because I want to make sure that the people who are most vulnerable within the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cohort are actually the people that are in line to get the services that they desperately need. And that's going to be some really important planning that's actually required going forward. The 4 targets in Close the Gap that are going in the wrong direction are the things that I like to focus on. One of those is, sadly, suicide. And the other one is children in out-of-home care. That's children who can't live with their families anymore, their birth families. Certainly, the other target is early childhood development, so underdevelopment in children, and the other one is incarceration. So these are targets that are just going completely in the wrong direction despite the investment. So we do have a lot of work to do to actually change the trajectory, because they're pretty awful trajectories, those. And remembering that even when we talk about targets, when we talk about Close the Gap, that's a cumulative target. In some areas, the outcome is much, much worse than the Close the Gap target actually tells us we're meeting in some areas, whereas the reality is in other areas, we're not even anywhere near meeting that target. So when we look at the data, we have to be careful that we don't make assumptions that the data covers the region, because it is a collective of data. So they're the issues that I think are really important to focus on. And the reason why I really want to focus on those is because when you look at those issues, those 4 issues, they're about the family. And if you're talking about self-determination, if you're actually focused on the family and the children, and families taking responsibility for children and for improving their own lives, those are the 4 areas where I think we can make the biggest difference. We just have to do a number of things to actually facilitate those improvements. And we know what they are. We've heard them in report after report over the years. One of those you mentioned before, and I mention often, is accountability for how funds are rolled out. One is making sure that organisations that are delivering do not operate in silos. And one is to make sure that people who actually need help actually have the support that's required to actually navigate a service system. because if people are in a situation where they're needing help, sometimes just having the strength and the ability to navigate a service system is a challenge for people. It's not something that is unique to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. It is the same for everyone, where English language might be an issue, literacy might be an issue, poverty might be an issue. Being from a community that where there are differences that might sometimes present as barriers as well as opportunities. So I think we need to be really mindful of all of those things coming together and recognising there is not one specific solution. And when people talk about community-led solutions, that is really important. There is community input. As you talked about, self-determination is actually about a community that is living in Central Australia in a remote area, might even be different to the community that's living in Alice Springs itself, or here in South Australia, in Adelaide versus Ceduna. Might be similar problems, but might need different approaches as well.
Yes, that statistic you said about the big increase in people who identified as Indigenous, I guess suggests that people are more willing to express that, because I know of some Indigenous who know of other families who try not to, or have tried not to make that known because of what they perceive as the stigma or potential bad, a negative reaction to it. So that's I guess that's a big part of the issues that we need to look at. Okay, cool. So how, again, well, next one generation down from you, your children, Italian Aboriginal, how do they meld with these realities?
It's funny. I was asked that when I've been asked that over the years, and I say they have the best of everything. They're lucky children. My children have spent time out bush, with families in remote communities. They're entirely comfortable in that environment. They're loved in that environment. And in the Italian family, they are not unfamiliar with still making sauce, still making sausages, still doing all of those things that bring families and communities together. And equally, they're as loved and as they fit. So it's not about do they fit in one world, do they fit in another. They're loved by both worlds, and isn't that a wonderful place for them to land? So I think they're very lucky.
Yes, no, and that's very good, nice to hear. And I think the more of that happens, the better, because there's less of this other attitude, and we get to understand each other a lot better, a lot more easily.
I think one of the things that will stay with me for many years is years ago we looked after a child that was from a very remote community, and he was not our child, he was a ward of the state, and we looked after him, and he's an adult now. And he appears in all the family photos. He was just part of the family. That was a really important part of him growing up. And I think that's the beauty of communities that just want to wrap love around people. And certainly that's what we've all experienced.
Yes, and it goes back to what you're saying about family and community being a basis for more stable, better lives. Okay, well, thank you very much, Senator Liddle, for coming on to Radio Italia in Adelaide, and we'll hope to speak more in future about these issues.
Thank you. It's lovely to join you.